Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video. Today we are back with the Championship review. Now this is a new feature we are adding to the channel after much demand. I know we've got a massive fan base of Championship viewers that watch this channel. So every Sunday we're going to be reviewing the Championship games over the weekend, looking at the table and breaking things down. If you want to see this become a regular thing, do make sure to drop a like and we'll keep doing this every Sunday. Do subscribe if you're new around here and I'll just break down the format of how this is going to work. So we're going to go through each game, probably spending a minute talking on each game, looking at the stats of the game and where it leaves each team in the table and their upcoming games as we move into the final stage of the season. And obviously after that we'll look at the table and all the next upcoming fixtures for everyone together. So like I say, if you do want to see more of this in the future, do drop a like and let's get straight into it with Saturday's games. We didn't have a Friday night game. We started with a lunchtime game between Blackburn Rovers and Queen's Park Rangers, which ended Blackburn 1, QPR 0. Kadra getting the goal with 13 minutes to go. It's a massive, massive win that for Blackburn Rovers. If you go back to the games they had prior to this, QPR just snuck that win against Blackpool. And you're thinking, okay, that's a big, big win. They'd been a bit patchy, QPR, but not as patchy as Blackburn. Blackburn had that Sheffield United defeat. And it was Kadra that missed the penalty. And obviously it was the last minute goal. And they were playing against 10 men. And I thought it was almost the kind of result which could foreshadow Blackburn falling away from a promotion race. But fair play to them picking out this win. A really solid win. If we go over to the stats on this one then, you can see Blackburn there. More shots on target. More corners. Big chances though. Interesting. QPR, we've said this before. Cookie in particular has said that big chances, QPR don't usually have a very good XG. Today, against Blackburn, they could have won. I mean, more big chances than Blackburn, but Blackburn took the chance. Kadra there, and like I say, we'll come to the table at the end, but that puts Blackburn in a very good position. Look at, what they were doing up until then. Their form had been a bit patchy. They now leapfrog QPR, and you almost think if this game was, say, 5 or 10 games closer to the end of the season, it'd have been a big, big game, and it's almost one of those results where it could define your season. But we're at that point now where you can still get away with the odd defeat. It's still, enough time to recover, but it's a big result. And you can see they're both there above 55 points. They're both very close there, you can see. Obviously, 34 games played apiece. So it's going to be very interesting for these two. I think these two are looking over their shoulders at the moment at the teams chasing them, and they're the teams we're going to be talking about next. Obviously, next up is Barnsley, and they took on Middlesbrough. And Middlesbrough obviously being one of them playoff chasing teams. And Barnsley picked out another win. This one looks a bit dramatic. 3-0 up through Anderson, and Bassi got a brace, of course. And yeah, it's impressive from Barnsley. I've got to say, I didn't back them to win. I backed them to lose by the 1 goal. But maybe next time out in my predictions, I might back Barnsley because they're starting to put the form together against a very decent Middlesbrough here as well. Middlesbrough come back. Obviously, Sporar scores a penalty, late own goal, but it wasn't going to change the outcome by the looks of that time that second goal went in for Middlesbrough. And you just start to think, with what this has done to the table, this is looking pretty interesting. If you still believe that Derby or Peterborough survive, then you've got to believe Barnsley can, because they are now the form team in that bottom 5 or 6. I suppose you could include Reading as well. Reading have been improving, but Barnsley with 3 wins in their last 5, I don't think any other team, you can see there in the bottom half, has actually done that. So it's a real U-turn for Barnsley, which is really interesting considering how poor they were. But remember, guys, go back 2 seasons, the season between the season before they went on that playoff charge. They obviously had that season where they stayed up in dramatic fashion with a late charge. I wonder if they could do it again. Let's have a little look at the stats on this one then. Barnsley there, so 7 shots. Oh, Middlesbrough 16. Big chances, 2-1 to Middlesbrough. It just tells me that Barnsley were clinical. I suppose you've got to be any kind of win. We get to that point of the season now where it's the homeward stretch. I would say it is results over performances. Performances are still very important. You want to be having positive performances. But if you could just be pulling out wins, then that is massive. And fair play to Barnsley, who are really making it interesting. Next up then, we go to St Andrews, where I think we kind of predicted this, didn't we? Do you know what? I didn't. I went for a shock win. I always throw a joker score in there, and I backed Birmingham City to beat Huddersfield. But no, Huddersfield Town going away to the Blues and winning by 2-0. Colwell and O'Brien with the goals, and it almost felt done at half-time, to be honest. I saw this score flash up at half-time when I was obviously at the Coventry game, And fair play to Huddersfield Town. They just keep grinding out the wins. And I feel like a lot of us, no offence to the Huddersfield fans, are almost waiting for that fall to come because you've got informed teams like Sheffield United. But I suppose Huddersfield are now the informed team, aren't they? They just haven't lost in so long, and they're putting some good wins together as well. So fair play to Huddersfield Town. Let's have a look at the stats on this one. Birmingham City versus Huddersfield. You can see there 11 shots to 7. Interesting. Birmingham City not scoring though. 3 big chances to 0. So Huddersfield, like I say, they're always the key stats. The big chances, like I say, the XG, it's kind of the big chances, the ones you'd expect to score, of course. And Huddersfield Town there doing pretty well, obviously, creativity-wise. And Birmingham City really lacklustre there. Birmingham City in a weird position, though, if we want to talk about them. Obviously, their season's fizzled out a little bit. And it's just like, they're not going down, but they're not going up. They're going to be one of them teams that just don't really have much to play for as we go into that final homeward stretch there on the beach. But a big win for Huddersfield. If we look at that table there, up to 3rd now. Surely we can't count Huddersfield in that top 2 race. I mean, look how many games more they've played than Bournemouth. But the thing is, look at that form. Bournemouth's form is very good. It would take a Bournemouth big slip, but if Huddersfield kept doing what they're doing, then they really could... well, they could get into the 80s this season. You know, they've got 11 games. They're on 59 points. If they could get into the 80s, then that is the high end of the playoffs and possibly 2nd place. But we'll wait and see. I'm sure the Huddersfield fans would just settle for the playoffs for now. Blackpool versus Reading next. This was an interesting game. You can see Blackpool obviously fell behind. Lucas João. And we touched on Reading, obviously, having João and Swift and Matey all sort of back together. And it's like, it's all coming good, isn't it? Obviously, Paul Ince has come in and... You think Reading, they've gone on a little charge, picked up a couple of results, and when they went 1-0 up, I did have a look at that result and thought, could they? But no, fair play to Blackpool. We've got to mention how good a result that is for them. We'll come to the table in a second because Blackpool, surely they can't make the playoffs, can they? But a big, big win nonetheless. Ekpieta, Medine, Lavery and Bowler. Bowler, by the way, is one of my favourite players in the Championship. And Blackpool, I do keep saying this every week, but they have been a fantastic addition to the Championship, considering they're a newly promoted team. They're not a team that's just come down that's playing well. They're a newly promoted team. We didn't see this last season. When we had Coventry, Wickham and Rotherham come up, they weren't exactly fighting towards the top half, were they? So fair play to Blackpool. But yeah, Reading, a bit of a setback. The comfort they can take is obviously they've been winning a couple of games, and of course Derby lost, which is what we're going to come on to. Let's have a look at the stats on this one. 15 shots apiece, 8 shots on target to 3. Okay, 3 big chances to 1. It does suggest Blackpool should have won. 4-1 is a very obviously strong result. Reading, another team, obviously Cookie mentions this, they don't perform all too well on the XG, but I've got to say some teams can just go about picking up results without very good XG. We saw that, you know, some teams can survive with bottom 3 XG, some teams can make the playoffs with mid-table XG, and obviously if you're clinical, if you could just keep doing it until the end of the season, it obviously works. Let's have a look at the table on this one then for Blackpool and Reading. Reading, 21st obviously, with Hull City's win, which is something we'll come on to. It does feel like it's gone back to that bottom 4, because obviously we saw Hull have a bad couple of results and we're thinking, can they get sucked in? Is it going to be a bottom 5? But no, it looks like Reading are going to be the team that has to shake everyone else off. That's the concern for Reading, is if Barnsley or Derby go on a good run, Reading are the team they would catch unless Reading were to do something pretty good. 7 points they've got to make up on Cardiff there. And obviously for Blackpool, up to 14th. It was their first win in a couple of games, actually. Obviously a bit unlucky at QPR the other day, weren't they, with that last-minute goal. But, what's that? 9 points off the playoffs. 12 games to go. I suppose if you're below points away, then there's games left. You'll try and see a way of making it, but you have to be pretty flawless. Realistically, to finish just 6th, Blackpool would have to go on sort of top 3 form for the rest of the season. So to the next game, which was Bournemouth versus Stoke. I think I got my prediction right on this one. And it's a late show from Bournemouth. Fair play to them. Stoke City go 1-0 up through Smith. Stoke City are a weird team, aren't they? They're just a bit, I don't know, a bit hit and miss. And I look at Stoke and almost think, well, nothing really is going to happen this season. Earlier on in the season, it was exciting. They were playing good football and they still have a good squad now, but I don't know, the results just aren't going in a way in which you can see them going up. Obviously, they took the lead. Then Fox sent off there, and Bournemouth with a late show. Stoke couldn't even hold out for a draw, and that is massive for Bournemouth, by the way. This result is more important for Bournemouth. Solanke and Lowe, not just securing a point, but all three. And like we say, there's a few teams, say, 7 or 8 points behind them, but I don't think Bournemouth are in too much of a dilemma if they just keep being fairly consistent. I think even, say, 4th or 5th place form would probably get them over the line, considering the gap they've got at the top of the table. And like I say, just churning out results like that are important. Here's your table. Bournemouth obviously up to 2nd. Stoke City just dwindling now in 15th place. That form, not great. Draw, loss in the last 4. But Bournemouth put it together, and it's 4 wins in a row. Obviously, they've had a bit of disruption. You can see they've got a few games in hand. And looking at them chances for Bournemouth, you can see their total shots. They had 16 to 8, 5 to 3, 7 off target to 4. Obviously, the big chances there, 4 to 1, and they hit the woodwork as well. So it does seem to me that obviously Stoke got the goal, then they get the red card. I mean, you know, if you go 1-0 up at Bournemouth already, it might be a bit siege mentality. But when you go down to 10, of course, it's going to be away at Bournemouth in the Championship. And Bournemouth obviously banging on the door. And they got through, but it was late. And, yeah, just about over the line there with Bournemouth's results. Like I say, even if they'd have drawn it, it's not the end of the world. But just a big win to keep that gap going. And, like I say, just keep that gap. Even if it just doesn't get cut too much. Ride it out to the end of the season. Keep picking up points in those games in hand as well. I think Bournemouth should be okay. Next up to the least surprising score of the day. Fulham winning again. Mitrovic scoring again. It's just, to be honest, if I'm to do this review show every week, I'm going to be repeating myself when it comes to Fulham. It's Fulham winning, Mitrovic scoring. I did predict Cardiff to give him a good game. I think I actually went for a 1-1 draw. And you can see that Cardiff obviously, you know, just losing 1-0. I know that sounds like I'm patronising them, but honestly, just being close in a game with Fulham is something. Let's get them stats up for you. Possession 66%, obviously quite high. Big chances 2 to 1 for Cardiff. So you can see there, Cardiff City obviously more than gave them a good game and probably feel like they should have got something from it. 11 shots to 9 in Fulham's favour. But I suppose it's more important for Fulham. They're churning out results. Cardiff City, I think what's interesting with Cardiff City is the position makes them look like they're in trouble. You see 20th place, you think, oh, 2 places above the bottom 3. The reality is they're 13 points above it. They're not going down, Cardiff City. Too much quality. And they have improved, if it is just slightly, through the season. They're one of them teams that you probably just think they want to get to the end of the season so they can have a good summer, build, and then they're looking forward to next season, because I don't see them going down, and they're obviously not going to make a playoff charge. But for Fulham, 70 points already, and they've still got 13 games to go. Obviously, the likes of Huddersfield and Blackburn, they've all played more games than them. So we're saying Fulham not getting caught for the title, but definitely not getting caught for the top 2 as well. Fulham would have to be pretty awful. I mean, look at that. They're in such a strong position. 4 wins in the last 5. Fulham are flying. Now, next up, wow. Coventry City 1, Preston North End 1. I went to this game, and I do have to say, I know I said it in the vlog yesterday, I apologise. I put my hands up. I left on 97 minutes or 96 minutes, and it's the first time ever, I think, I've left a game before the full-time whistle, and that will not happen again. I have heard your comments. I know a lot of you are angry, and I will not do that again, especially with Coventry and our track record. Late goals galore, and it's Tavares who pops up with it. Interesting game, actually. Obviously, I saw a good 96 minutes of this one. I've got to say, I think Coventry City coming into this, well, myself anyway, we've been picking up results, but we haven't actually been playing all too well. And I thought to myself, Preston, I think they're a tougher opponent than Bristol City. They're a tougher opponent than Barnsley. And I expected a tough game. They're also a bogey team. I think I backed us to lose. So even just to get a draw in any way, shape or form, I'd have been pretty happy considering we picked up back-to-back wins before that. And it kind of played out that way. Coventry City weren't at their best. I think one thing you've got to distinguish is Coventry City on the ball, possession-wise, we're still very silky. Honestly, even in our worst games, we can pass the ball nice. Ben Sheaf and Gustavo Hamer are really, really good. And I feel like the transition from defence to attack for Coventry is always very, very exciting. but we're just not creating so many chances. But it's interesting, we are getting goals, and earlier on in the season we were creating a lot of chances and weren't getting all the goals, so things really balancing themselves out there. But fair play to Preston, very physical, sometimes you'd say cynical, obviously a lot of yellow cards, and ultimately it resulted in a red. Yeah, interesting how it worked out, 84 minutes of pretty much nothing. I mean, we were heading for a non-event, weren't we? I mean, it was not a bad game, but we were looking at a goalless draw, and then you get the first red card. And the frustrating thing for me is, when you're in that position, you do not give away a stupid penalty or a red card, but you've got to credit Preston's movement. Obviously, the through ball, and Jacobson gets himself into a good position. I want to see your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think it was a penalty? It looks like there's a little bit of contact in there. If it is contact, I suppose it is a penalty. But what about the red card? I mean, I didn't think they were doing that so much anymore. Double jeopardy, obviously, it's red card and penalty. It's double punishment for Coventry. And then obviously we have to mention the Coventry fans running onto the pitch. Obviously everyone's got different opinions on that. I saw what Mark Robins had to say on this, and I'm pretty aligned with what he said. He said the pitch is obviously sacrosanct, and obviously you don't run onto it. You know, it's a professional place of work for these footballers. I know obviously you can get caught up in the moment, but ultimately the club will get fined, and ultimately these are fans, you know, they might have had a spur of the moment thing, but if they really support their club, they're going to be getting bans, you know, they're not going to be able to go to the games, so ultimately it's them who suffer. But like I say, you know, if they want to run on, they've got to face the consequences. Then obviously it delayed the penalty, and that's why we got loads of extra time as well. So obviously the penalty is stuck away after Dabo's red card, Johnson scoring. You can see there a 3-minute gap between the red card and the goal, so that's obviously 3 minutes extra for the fans running on the pitch. And then we get 6 added minutes, and this is why I was surprised as well. 6 minutes have played, I'm there on the steps, and I think there's a substitution. I think Ched Evans was going off. I think that's it. Okay, yeah, the referee blows his whistle after that. I'll cut the cues. A lesson, I'm not doing that again. Coventry City get a free kick, Preston don't deal with it, and Fabio Tavares, honestly, I'm so happy for that guy, sticks it in the top corner. I've seen some Coventry fans saying, obviously, you know, he should get more minutes now. I agree, I think he should be given more. I think when you've got a young player like this with definitely a lot of potential, you've got to bed them in gently, obviously, you know, you don't just go, right, he's going to start the next game, but he certainly should get more minutes, it should be built up. And although it's taken Mark Robins a long time to listen to the fans, maybe he'll start using him more. Let's have a look at the stats on this one then. Coventry City, Preston. Because I ultimately think Preston probably were the better team. Big chances, there you go, 1-0. Hit the woodwork, 1-0. More shots for Preston. I mean, it does make a change to see Coventry City not dominating the stats. I mean, we have more possession, but honestly, a lot of the time Coventry City have more of everything, but not on this occasion. And I've got to say, I was fairly impressed by Preston, to be fair, considering they're mid-table. Is there too much to play for? Possibly. I mean, you know, we say anyone in mid-table, go on a late charge. Can they make the playoffs? A point apiece. You can see Coventry City in 10th, Preston in 12th. I think Coventry dropped one place with Forest winning. I touched on this the other day. Look how many green W's there are. It is F1 racing. Honestly, everyone is winning and overtaking everyone. And the only time some of the top teams lose is when they're playing everyone else. Look at Millwall sneaking up behind us with 4 wins in a row. So Coventry City is still in the mix. It's a very, very good point. But things are getting tight, and if you really want to make the top 6, you've really got to stand out. But even if we just make the top 10, it'd be a great achievement. And fair play to Preston as well. You can see there, 11 wins, 14 draws, 10 defeats. Kind of middling / top half. Next up to the Kenny, Luton Town beating Derby County 1-0. Hilton with the goal. I did have an eye on this game while I was at the Coventry City game, because I was intrigued when it got to 60 minutes and it was still goalless. And every kind of few minutes I do check up on the other scores, and it was still goalless up until this goal. And then I think we've touched on with Derby County before, the first goal can go on to win it, because I thought if Derby County can hold out, they could possibly get something. But Luton scoring first for me was ultimately going to result in a Luton win. Although Derby County do love a late show, they do love some late goals. But if we look at what this does to the table, both teams obviously affected quite heavily by this, because they've both got a lot to play for. You can see Luton Town sneak into the top 6 because Sheffield United lost to inform Millwall. And Derby, I suppose they'll be a little bit happy that Reading didn't win again this weekend, but ultimately Derby need to get results for themselves. And you can see there, they've slipped below Barnsley now, which just seems a little bit surreal. Barnsley, we were slating them for being terrible, and all of a sudden they popped their head above the water. Ultimately, Derby have picked up 20 more points than Barnsley, realistically, haven't they? You know, they've had a 21 points deduction, but you know what I mean. Barnsley are still going to try and do what they can to mess things up. We're going to come on to Peterborough in a bit, but it is very interesting down the bottom. If Derby and Barnsley can just pull it a bit closer, we could get one hell of a final sort of running. And then Luton, yeah, top 6, very, very good. But like we said, it is F1 racing. They've got to keep winning, which they are doing. Big results. We might as well check in on the stats on this one. Were Luton worthy of the win? Let's have a look. They had more possession. 2 big chances to 0. They hit the woodwork, and so did Derby, to be fair, with more shots and possession. But Derby County are another team that sometimes won't do too well in the stats, but can grind out a result. So they might have less shots, less big chances, but they still get a result. Millwall 1, Sheffield United 0. Very, very interesting result, this one. 2 informed teams. You thought something's got to give here, and ultimately it's Sheffield United's good run that caved in. But ultimately, I think Sheffield United, if they keep doing what they're doing, they should bounce back. But it's all about Millwall here, who actually, like I say, up to 11th, they were one of those teams in and around 12th to 16th that you're kind of writing off as a bit of a beachy team. But if they go on a good run in the sort of early 30s kind of games, you know, between 30 and 35 games, then they just pull themselves back into it before that final run, because we get to a point soon where, say on about 38 games, when you could start counting teams out of the playoff race, because either it's just never been done before or it is mathematically impossible. And Millwall are very much in it again. 49 points there, so 5 points behind. Like I say, it is F1 racing. They really need to keep winning and obviously keep that good run going. But fair play to them. And what they've done at the same time is they've beaten a team that was in the top 6, Sheffield United, who've fallen to 7th. So it is playing those teams around you and winning those games that is crucial. And Sheffield United obviously slipping up there. And yeah, the Championship's not very forgiving. Sheffield United have been brilliant. They lose one game and they're at the top 6. So it's, like I say, not very forgiving for Sheffield United. But if they can bounce back, you can see there they've got games in hand on QPR and Blackburn and Huddersfield. Let's have a look at the stats for this one. More possession for Sheffield United, more chances, more big chances. And, yeah, did they hit the woodwork? It's not showing me on this one. But, yeah, interesting there. Millwall grinding out the result nonetheless. The goal coming in, well, 61 minutes. It's that kind of the hour mark, isn't it, where you think that could be a winner. I mean, you get to that stage where you just have to grind out half an hour of good defensive duties. And I know it's not a smash and grab, it's not the last 10 minutes, but I don't know, when you score on the hour mark in a sort of cagey 0-0 game, it feels like it could obviously always be enough to go on and win it 1-0. And that was the case for Millwall, who've obviously got a pretty decent defence recently, grinding out these results. So fair play to Millwall. Next up, we go to the City Ground, where Forest won again. They obviously dropped points in the week when they played Preston, but back to winning ways against Bristol City, who are just a bit patchy, aren't they, Bristol City? And Johnson and Garner getting the goals. Let's start by looking at the stats for this one. Wow. Okay, yeah. Dominating the stats, although only the one big chance for Nottingham Forest, but Bristol City, that's not great, is it? Doesn't look like they created all too much to trouble Forest, so relatively decent afternoon for Forest. And look at that, puts them back in the mix. They're up to 9th. Coventry City and Forest at the moment just jumping above each other, because one will win and the other one will draw. It's and it is that tight that even draws at this point are starting to look like negative results for most teams. You know, even against some of the best teams, everyone else is winning. You've got to be winning, and Forest won. So they're still in the mix. I think Forest are one of those teams that will go right to the wire. But for Bristol City, it's just kind of, you're looking at one of them teams already, aren't you? I mean, 35 games played, so they've only got 11 games if they were to make a playoff charge, and they're on, what, 40 points? They'd have to win all 11, wouldn't they? And they're not going down. You know, they're just in that kind of position where it's almost a bit boring as a fan. We're in February and the season's practically over. But fair play to Forest, and Bristol City will have to bounce back in the next one. Peterborough United 0, Hull City 3. This result came as a surprise to me. I backed Peterborough to win. I thought McCann coming in. Hull City haven't been doing very well. But it almost feels, and I don't want to say this and commit to it, because the Championship is obviously a very flip-floppy league, but it does feel like the result which sends Peterborough hurtling towards League One, because we've had a couple of results lately where they drew 0-0 at home to Reading, you know, it's not good. They had some good chances. They could have won that one. And then the defeat at Derby in the last minute. And then this one. I think those results together, and ultimately the results over the season just haven't been good enough for Peterborough, who we had been priding on their home form, but this is a terrible result. But we've got to give plaudits to Hull City. Massive result for them, who have surely pushed open a gap that cannot be sealed now. I mean, Hull City would have to go on one of them terrible runs that they did a couple of seasons ago to get relegated. Big chances, 2-0. Total shots, yeah, they have more there. Looks like Hull City worthy of the win. 3-0 maybe being a bit harsh on Peterborough, but I don't know. Looks like the stats do suggest Hull should have won regardless. And I've got to say, Lewis Potter is standing out. He's a very good player, isn't he? A brace in this one for him. And Hull City are above Birmingham now. So if you think Hull City aren't safe yet, you don't think Birmingham are safe yet because they're level on points there. Peterborough just... I don't think they've looked ready for the Championship for most of this season, which is a bit of a shame because they've had one or two, obviously, decent games. I mean, they've won 5 this season. I think their only away win came at Hull. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, not good enough for Peterborough. So then, that wraps up the reviews for the games obviously played over the weekend. And obviously, we're going to look at the fixtures in a second. But let's start by working our way up the table. Peterborough, we just touched on, bottom of the league. 8 points adrift, 13 games to go. It's mid-table / top half form for them to stay up now. And like I say, there's just no greens in there. Peterborough, no greens. At least everyone above them up until West Brom has at least had a win in their last 5 games. So the ultimate thing is, even teams that are winning 1 in 5 are moving faster than Peterborough. Derby County still in the mix. Derby County, it feels like the last 2 weeks have been very, very harsh on them. Whether they've deserved to lose them games or not, but it feels like the other results have really transpired against them. You could say earlier in the season the results were being kind to Derby, and the fact that Reading were really poor, Barnsley were really poor, and Peterborough were really poor, and it almost like gave Derby some false hope. But if Reading are actually going to start turning into more of a survival team, then Derby could be in trouble. Barnsley, I'm going to keep an eye on them now. It's still a lot of hard work to go, but they've got a game in hand. It's just 6 points now. But ultimately, their concern as well is Reading getting better. But if Barnsley just keep winning, then even if Reading are winning, someone else would get caught. So they can't both keep winning and both not stay up, if you get what I'm saying. So Cardiff or Birmingham could get sucked in their place. You can see Cardiff and Birmingham there. They're probably thinking we're probably all right. And so too Hull and even Swansea. Not doing very well. But Swansea have got a few games in hand. Those group of teams are okay up until Barnsley and Derby go on good runs again. And then it's like, okay, we need to get another win just to get over the line because they're so close to 40 points. And 40 could be enough. As we move up the table, we've got a lot of teams that... I don't know, from my perspective, it's almost like it's not exciting, but I suppose you're always going to have those teams, Bristol City and Stoke City, who, plaudits them for not being bad enough to go down, but is that good enough, really? I mean, Stoke City were in a playoff chase earlier this season, and they've just petered away. Blackpool's still doing bits by hanging on in there in mid-table, and a big result, actually, 4-1 against Reading. Very strong. West Brom, we'll touch on them in a second. They play Swansea next, so they have the chance to try and turn things around soon. Preston obviously hanging on in there in mid-table with some good results. I feel like in their last 2 draws against Forest and Coventry, they really could have made claims that they could have won both of those games. But 2 draws, so it's kind of middling, isn't it, for Preston? Millwall there, 4 wins in a row. They are speeding up the division. And just wins like that, wherever you are in the league, are obviously going to boost you up a few places. And Millwall there, I suppose you've got to count them in the playoff race. Coventry City, my team. 10 points from 5 is 2 points a game. Let's say Coventry City do that over the next 13 games, which would be 26. That'd obviously put us all the way up to 77, which is definitely enough. It won't always be that good. This was obviously Coventry's so-called favourable run. We have got hard games to come. What's obviously coming for Coventry City next is games against Luton, I think Swansea and Sheffield United. So some pretty interesting matches. Forest obviously still doing bits, but like I say, just the 2 wins in 5 doesn't seem that good for Forest, considering the standards they've set themselves. Just 2 wins in 5 for Middlesbrough and Sheffield United as well, which is actually ultimately why they're all not in the playoffs at the moment, because 2 wins in 5 isn't bad, but when you've got Luton who've won 4 in 5, they're speeding past you. I think QPR and Blackburn should be slightly worried. They're in reasonably healthy positions for now, But they need to play like playoff teams now to get over the line. They can't keep picking up wins and then defeats and then draws and then defeats and then wins. Mid-table form will see them slip out when you've got teams in playoff form. So QPR and Blackburn just about hanging on in there. Huddersfield Town, obviously, keep saying they've played more games, but they're just racking up them points now. And they're nearly at 60. They just need a good run to get to 70. And then it's almost job done, isn't it? When you get into the 70s, you're almost there. Huddersfield looking strong. Bournemouth, what a win that was against Stoke. I don't really know who's going to catch them. I think if you're a Bournemouth fan, who do you look at and say they're going to catch us? Because Sheffield United were the form team, but they've obviously dropped points and lost ground on them this weekend. And then you've got Fulham, who are just fantastically strong. So fair play to Fulham. So then what's coming in the next week or two in the Championship? We have got West Bromwich Albion versus Swansea. We'll do a live stream for that tomorrow on Monday, 8 p.m. Big game. West Brom really need to turn things around. So do Swansea. Tuesday we'll do another stream. Cardiff Derby, what a big game that is for Derby County and Cardiff. I mean, ultimately, if Cardiff lose that, they're letting Derby County sneak up on them a bit. I think Cardiff should be alright this season. And Derby, who have been backing a lot of this season saying they'll stay up, they need to pull something out soon. Otherwise, hope is fading. And then you can see next weekend's fixtures, 2 games on the Friday, Huddersfield, Peterborough. You'd imagine the form suggests Huddersfield win, but you never know in the Championship. Sheffield United Forest is a good one. Fulham Blackburn on the Saturday is good. And then Bristol City Birmingham. Derby Barnsley is a big one. Hull City West Brom. Middlesbrough Luton's a big one. Preston versus Bournemouth. QPR Cardiff. Reading Millwall. Stoke Blackpool. And Swansea Coventry. So then guys, that wraps up our talk on the Championship results over the weekend and how the table's looking and the upcoming fixtures. Give me your thoughts down below. If you went to the game, give me some details on it and who's looking good for your team at the moment. Is your team going to make the playoffs? Is your team going to stay up? Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you've dropped a like and subscribed. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.